Alright, it's time to talk about lances and shields. Now, personally, I don't believe that lances make very good DPS primary weapons. There are better choices if you want to use melee as your primary source of damage, but they offer fantastic utility and are still worth using on certain builds. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. Now, the two the two lances that are fighting for first place are the Crimson Horn and the Celestial Spear, depending on the targets. If you're fighting enemies with weak points, Celestial Spear is going to do more damage than Crimson Horn because it's got a 50% weak point modifier, a weak point exploit, compared to Crimson Horn's 25%, but otherwise these two deal very comparable damage. Crimson Horn, on the other hand, is a better choice for everything else because it has the ability to stun while still competing with Celestial Spear for tying damage against other targets. And now to complement this build, we're also going to be using the Concordia Shield and the Heliosphere and Bloodsucker Flamethrower and Acid Gun, respectively, to add on to the utility focus of this build. As far as shoulder weapons go, we'll be using the Gaia Ray or One Drop, depending on the situation. Gaia Ray has higher sustained DPS, but really poor ammo efficiency compared to One Drop, which has higher burst damage and much greater ammo efficiency. Both of these weapons can reach a 2.3 times femto bonus modifier, which is very easily maintained with Concordia's ability to absorb femto. We'll also be using the Reserve Magazine 2 for the Gaia Ray, and if you're using One Drop, because it's so much more ammo efficient, you can use the Hermes 2 for greatly increased mobility instead. As for the arsenal itself, we're using Primus Pilus for its incredibly good femto efficiency, the Futsunushi Assault for its excellent overall stats and high memory capacity. You can use other torsos if you prefer, but I really like Futsunushi for this due to its balance of defenses, femto capacity, and memory capacity. The Amalgamate arm is going to be used for the Brawling arm due to its high brawling and femto capacity. And the right arm, for the same reason as the torso, will be Futsunushi, thanks to its excellent overall stats. The legs are going to be Berserk for its high femto capacity to memory capacity balance. It's the highest femto capacity you can get for the memory capacity that it offers. Anything with better femto capacity will offer less memory capacity and make the balance a little more difficult. Alright, now that we've covered the build itself, let's look at each component, starting with the lances. Now, Celestial Spear and Crimson Horn both do functionally the same. They're functionally identical in terms of overall damage output when looking at soft and hard targets. But Celestial Spear does notably higher damage to weak points than Crimson Horn does because it has notably higher weak point exploit. Both of these weapons have the same critical modifier, so crit isn't really a calculation you need to worry about for either one of them because they are identical in terms of crit output. But if you're looking at fighting colossals such as Grousum, which have multiple permanent weak points that can be easily exploited, Celestial Spear is going to be a better option for you. However, if you are fighting enemies that do not have permanently exploitable weak points, such as arsenals or particular colossals, Crimson Horn is going to be a better option because it will do the same damage as Celestial Spear, but you can get a free stun or two during the battle, which gives you several seconds of free damage uptime. That being said, I don't particularly like lances as a primary damage output weapon in the first place. I feel like their damage output, their DPS just isn't that great. So I don't really use them for the purpose of outputting maximum damage. I kind of just add them for their incredibly good utility on certain builds. With that being said, if you really want to dual wield them and use them as your primary damage output, you can, and it will work. Uh, they have a relatively fast dual strike and very long combo chains, so if you're good at managing their crits, they can do okay damage output. It's just not going to compare to some of the other weapons that we have access to. But you can use them in this manner if you really want to. As far as lance skills go, there are four to choose from, but really, Rush Assault and Combo Thrust are the only two options that I feel are worth considering at all, depending on what you want. If you want to maximize your DPS, Combo Thrust is going to be the way to go, obviously, because with lances, Combo Thrust hits relatively hard. It's pretty decent DPS, maybe about 250 damage per second. Um, but it does not have the mobility of Rush Assault. So you can use this as a damage output if you really want to, but I prefer Rush Assault by leagues because Rush Assault, even though it has half the damage output of Combo Thrust, it makes you really, really mobile. Even with a heavy build like this, you can absolutely scream across the map, and this makes it very easy to keep up with quick enemies such as Zeracroor that like to bounce all around the map. Now to address shields, there are a lot of shield options that are really good, but I feel like Concordia is the best by leagues. Concordia has excellent overall defensive capabilities, but it also has built-in femto absorption that dwarfs Macro Barrier's femto absorption ability. Absolutely dwarfs it. You get 200 femto back for every single hit that Concordia absorbs. It can absorb bullets, it can absorb stun guns, it can absorb laser rays, the Nova, like it blocks everything, and it can absorb basically every projectile type. And that makes it incredibly, incredibly potent, which also lends to highly defensive heavy builds that you normally would not be able to get more than 8 or 9,000 femto on to have functionally infinite femto, and you don't have to worry about using like Alxo or Demeter sets or anything like that, which are relatively middling when it comes to defensive abilities but high femto capacity. This allows you to focus entirely on other aspects of the build without worrying about your femto capacity. There are some other options such as Finn and Cygnus Lux which have higher defensive capabilities overall, but I find that Concordia's damage mitigation is more than enough, more than you would need. Now, as far as our sub weapons, we're going to be using the Heliosphere Flamethrower and the Bloodsucker Acid Gun to add a little bit extra damage over time, and that'll fit the utility theme of this build. For the shoulder weapon, we want something with more punch because we really don't have a lot of damage output. And the two best options for this setup are going to be Gaia Ray and One Drop, depending on your preference and also depending on what you're fighting. Gaia Ray has higher sustained DPS but much lower total damage potential and lower ammo efficiency, whereas One Drop has higher burst damage and far greater damage efficiency, being able to do about triple the damage over its total ammo compared to Gaia Ray, but it can't do as much damage per second as Gaia Ray within its ammo capacity, if that makes sense. So Gyre is a better option for fighting arsenals and low rank colossals such as Insania Rex. Whereas if you want to fight Omegas, you're really going to want to use one drop for this build, as it's got higher damage potential. Gyre also requires the auxiliary ammunition, whereas if you're using one drop, you can actually swap out the auxiliary ammo for Hermes 2, which will give you kind of silly mobility with this setup. The kind of mobility that you shouldn't normally have when you've got a shield held up running on a heavy build. Now, something that's really neat about the Rush Assault skill for Lances is enemies like Yaiba, Gearworm, and Legion, which like to run around a lot, this kind of breaks them. It sometimes they just stand still and don't move at all when you hit them with it, and other times they do this where they kind of stagger and don't really move much, and you can just wear them down really, really quickly. This makes farming Yaiba really, really simple, and so you can get his Futsunushi set and Soryu farmed up really easily with basically no effort whatsoever. One other benefit of this setup is the shield allows you to block even normally unblockable attacks, such as Insania Rex's incredibly annoying Nova attack. You can just basically face tank it, but you do need to use limit change so that you don't run out of stamina. With that being said, if you don't want to worry about the Nova at all and you just want to skip it entirely, Gaia Ray's damage output is actually high enough to completely skip Insania Rex's second phase entirely, so you don't even have to worry about blocking with it. Finally, even though the Lance does not have very high damage output with Rush Assault allows you to stay glued to annoying enemies like Zeracor, which are normally bouncing and jumping and flying around. You can just start the skill and hold down the attack button, and he's not going to go anywhere that you can't go. The build is tanky enough that even if you're not using your shield, you're going to be able to tank his stun attacks and all of his other stuff very comfortably, and you can just stay on top of him and wear him down with basically no effort whatsoever. So while this is not the fastest way to take out Zeracor, it is one of the most mind-numbingly simple ways to do it.
We can win. We will win. No! You're still good, right? We've got this. Back off! Back off! We did it! Never doubted us.
And last but not least, I think one of the greatest potentials this build has is going to be in PvP. Now, I know some of you are skeptical on whether or not PvP will come out. Mark my words, PvP will be released likely next year once they got all of their main DLCs done. It will be added as an arena, but it's not going to be particularly competitive. It's mostly just going to be something to keep the game a little bit alive after the main content is done. They did the same thing in the first game, they're going to do it in this game as well. It's just not going to be priority. But when PvP does come out, builds like this are going to be far more successful in the arena than your typical high DPS builds with not much nuance to them because of how easily countered those high DPS builds will be. There are skills such as Bullet Reflect that will completely shut down machine gun and minigun setups and other such builds. And there are also builds that can counter melee builds such as Knives with Utsu Shimmy and Knuckles with their own counter ability. You're not going to see a lot of limit change, combo thrust, knuckle spamming setups that are really going to do well. Maybe in the early week or week two of PvP, but after that point, builds like this are going to be much more prevalent. Even though its damage output is not that great, its survivability is absolutely insane, and really the only thing you have to do is make sure you do more damage to the enemy than you are taking from limit changes damage over time. Which, when you're fighting in PvP, could be pretty easily mitigated by swapping Gaia Ray out for Devotion, or even Splendor and just standing in it, and you could pretty effectively just chip away with the lance with this setup. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope this was helpful. Hope you had fun watching, and hopefully you can give something like this a try, even though it may not be the current meta for PvE.